It wasn't the trophy lift that made the stadium fall silent. It was Novak Djokovic looking into the stands, locking eyes with Rafael Nadal, and admitting something no one expected to hear. For years we watched these two legends fight like gladiators on this very stage. Now one of them was sitting still, and the other was fighting back tears after one of the most painful losses of his career. And what Djokovic said next might end up being remembered even more than the match itself. Because this wasn't just another Grand Slam final. This felt like the closing scene of an era. Djokovic came into the 2026 Australian Open chasing history. Not just another title. Not just another record. He was going after number 25, the slam that would have put him alone at the top of tennis immortality. At 38 years old, he was still moving like a man with unfinished business, still sliding on the Melbourne hard courts like they belonged to him. And early on, it looked like destiny was on his side. He started the final sharp, aggressive, and locked in. The serve was landing. The returns were deep. The angles were cruel. For a moment, it felt like we were watching vintage Novak, the version that makes even the greatest players look slightly helpless. But across the net stood Carlos Alcaraz, and that's where the story shifted. Alcaraz didn't panic. He didn't rush. He absorbed the pressure, like someone who had been waiting for this exact moment his whole life. Shot by shot, rally by rally, the momentum tilted. What began as a Djokovic masterclass slowly transformed into a showcase of the future of tennis. And here's the crazy part. Even as Alcaraz took control, the loudest emotion in the stadium wasn't just excitement. It was tension, because everyone knew what was at stake for Novak. This wasn't just a final. This might have been his last real shot at that record in Melbourne. When the final point ended and Alcaraz dropped the court in celebration, the camera cut to Djokovic. No racket smash, no dramatic outburst, just a long look toward his team, then toward the crowd, and finally toward one specific section of the stands. Rafael Nadal was sitting there. That image alone felt surreal. For nearly 2 decades, the Australian Open was a battlefield for these two. They pushed each other through 5-hour wars, through matches that left both men limping and legends growing. Seeing Nadal in the crowd instead of on the baseline felt like time had fast-forwarded without asking permission. And Djokovic felt it too. During the trophy ceremony, after praising Alcaraz and thanking his team, Novak paused. His voice softened. Then he looked up into the stands and said it felt weird to see Nadal there and not on the court. You could hear the shift in the air. This wasn't rivalry talk. This was respect. This was history speaking to history. He said it had been an honor to share the court with Rafa all these years, and that having him watch the final was a strange but special feeling. For a player who built part of his greatness by going through Nadal, that moment carried weight you could almost touch. Then Novak did something very Novak. He added humor through the emotion. He joked that with Nadal in the stands and Alcaraz across the net, it felt like 2 Spanish legends against 1 Serbian. He called an unfair 2 versus 1 situation, and the crowd laughed through the lump in their throats. But behind the joke was a deeper truth. The balance of power in tennis has changed. For so long, the sport revolved around 3 names: Federer, Nadal, Djokovic. Every slam felt like a new chapter in their shared story. Now Federer is gone, Nadal is watching, and Djokovic is fighting a new generation that grew up idolizing him. And Carlos Alcaraz just proved he's not here to wait politely. By winning this Australian Open, Alcaraz didn't just collect another trophy. He became the youngest player to complete the career Grand Slam. Let that sink in. At an age when most players are still figuring out their game, he has already conquered every major surface. Grass, clay, hard courts. He's done it all. And he did it by beating the greatest hard court player of all time in his own backyard. That's not just symbolic. That is a shift in the tennis universe. Still, the most talked about part of the night wasn't Alcaraz's forehand or Djokovic's backhand. It was the final lines of Novak's speech. After thanking the fans and reflecting on the journey, he said something that stopped people mid-clap. He said only God knows what happens tomorrow, let alone in 6 months or a year. Then he called it a great ride and told the crowd he loved them. If you follow Djokovic's career, you know he doesn't throw words around carelessly. That sounded less like a routine goodbye and more like a man staring at the edge of a chapter he knows can't last forever. Was this his last Australian Open? He didn't say it directly. And to be clear, this is speculation, not confirmation. But the tone, the emotion, the timing, all of it felt different. Melbourne has been his kingdom. 10 titles. Countless epic matches. Comebacks that defied logic. For that journey to possibly end with a speech like that, in front of Nadal in the stands and Alcaraz holding the trophy, feels almost too cinematic to be random. And here's where it gets even more emotional. Djokovic and Nadal's rivalry wasn't just about trophies. It was about contrast. Fire versus ice. Lefty spin versus elastic defense. Two men dragging each other to levels the sport had never seen. Seeing one retire and the other hint at the end reminds us that we're not just watching matches anymore. We're watching the last pages of a legendary book. At the same time, Alcaraz represents the next volume. He plays with joy, creativity, and fearlessness. He respects the legends, but doesn't fear them. Beating Djokovic in a slam final on Rod Laver Arena is a statement that echoes beyond one night. It says the future isn't coming. It's already here. But even in victory, the spotlight kept drifting back to Novak and Rafa. There was something poetic about Djokovic losing to a Spaniard while Nadal watched. For years, Nadal was the Spanish wall Novak had to break. Now a new Spanish superstar stands in that place, and Rafa is witnessing the handover in real time. You could almost see it on Nadal's face. Pride for Alcaraz, respect for Djokovic, maybe even a little nostalgia for the wars they once fought. Moments like this are why sports hit so deep. They remind us that time moves, heroes age, and new legends rise, whether we're ready or not. For Djokovic fans, this loss hurts. Not just because it was a final, not just because of the record on the line, but because it forces a question nobody wants to answer. How many more nights like this does he have left? Physically, he's still elite. Mentally, he's still one of the toughest competitors ever. But tennis history is undefeated. Eventually, even the greatest feel the miles. What makes this different is that Novak seems to feel it too. That doesn't mean he's done. He could come back hungrier, chase number 25 at another slam, and remind everyone why counting him out is always a mistake. Writing him off has burned people for nearly 2 decades. But emotionally, this Australian Open felt like a turning point. And maybe that's what makes Alcaraz's win even more powerful. He didn't just beat a champion. He might have been part of a generational goodbye. So here's the big question for you. Do you think this was Djokovic's final Australian Open appearance? Or does he have one more miracle run left in Melbourne? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this moment means different things to different fans. And I want to hear your take. No matter what happens next, this night gave us something bigger than a scoreline. It gave us gratitude. Gratitude for rivalries that shaped the sport. Gratitude for a champion still fighting at 38. And excitement for a young star bold enough to take the throne while the kings are still watching. That image of Djokovic speaking to Nadal in the stands will live on, not as a sign of weakness, but as a symbol of respect between warriors who pushed each other beyond limits. And right beside that memory will be Alcaraz lifting the trophy, proof that tennis never stands still. One era bows, another rises, and we were lucky enough to witness the handshake between them under the lights in Melbourne. This is why we watch. This is why we care. And this is why nights like this stay with us long after the court goes quiet. Thank you for being part of the Tennis IQ community, where we don't just follow tennis, we feel every chapter of its story. I'll see you in the next one.